Snow had been falling since early morning, soft white flakes piling on the old roof, dusting the neighborhood in a postcard, perfect glow. Inside our house, however, the air was heavy, brittle, like the branches of the frozen oak outside. Christmas had always been complicated in my family. For most people, it was a holiday of laughter, warm food, and joy. For us, it was a reminder of obligations, bills, and expectations. My father sat at the head of the table, as always, stern and sharp, his expression unchanged even as the golden light of the Christmas tree twinkled across his glasses. I had worked hard that month, harder than I ever admitted to anyone, double shifts at the diner, late nights freelancing just to scrape together enough to help cover the December bills. My paycheck had gone straight into the electric, water, and internet accounts. I didn't even get myself a single gift. My only gift was making sure the lights stayed on, that the oven worked to roast the turkey, and that my younger siblings could unwrap their presents with joy. And for a fleeting moment, watching my sister beam as she opened the dollhouse she'd begged for, I felt proud. My chest warmed with quiet satisfaction. Maybe, finally, my father would notice what I'd done. Maybe he'd see me not as a burden, but as someone who contributed, who cared. But hope is a dangerous thing in my father's house. He reached across the table, snatched the stack of envelopes, bills, receipts, notices that I had already settled earlier in the week. His eyes darted over them, calculating, frowning. I braced myself. This is ridiculous. He muttered, shaking the paper as if it were the source of his misery. December bills, and we're barely scraping by. I opened my mouth gently, cautiously. Dad, I already covered most of them. Electricity, water, internet, they're all paid. I used my paycheck. Instead of relief, his face twisted into disdain. He looked at me like I had just admitted to stealing rather than sacrificing. Covered, he let out a dry, bitter laugh. Don't act like you're some savior. You eat here, you live under my roof, you use heat, water, internet. Paying a couple bills isn't charity. It's the bare minimum. My fork stilled on my plate. The chatter at the table hushed. My siblings glanced nervously between us. My mother pressed her lips together as if she wanted to speak but feared the storm in his tone. Dad, I didn't mean. I tried again, but he cut me off, his voice rising like a whip. You think you're useful, you think you're important, you're nothing but a parasite, living off me, pretending to help, but in truth, you drain more than you give. The word hit me harder than any slap could have. Parasite. My throat tightened. Everything I do for this family. I stayed home when my friends went away. I picked up jobs so you wouldn't drown in debt. Jobs. He sneered. Some pathetic shifts at a diner and a few pennies from your so-called freelance work. That's not a career. That's not real. You're just hiding from responsibility, pretending you matter. Heat burned behind my eyes, but I swallowed it down, refusing to cry in front of him. My chest felt heavy, crushed under invisible weight. I wanted to scream, to list every sacrifice. Every night I'd gone hungry so my siblings could eat. Every bill I quietly paid so he wouldn't stress. But I knew it wouldn't matter. Get out, he said suddenly, his voice cold, final. The room froze. My sister whimpered. My mother gasped. Dad, my brother whispered, his voice small. I said get out. He repeated, slamming his hand on the table. You want to act like an adult? Fine. Leave. See how long you last out there without me. Maybe then you'll realize how useless you really are. For a moment, all I could do was stare at him. The man who was supposed to protect me, nurture me, guide me. He was looking at me like I was vermin. I rose slowly, my chair scraping against the wooden floor. The sound echoed in the silence. My hands shook as I set my napkin down. I glanced at my siblings, their eyes wide with fear and sadness. I wanted to hug them, reassure them, but my father's glare burned into my skin. So I walked to my room, packed what little I could into a bag, and left. The cold hit me immediately as I stepped outside. Snowflakes clung to my eyelashes, the night sky heavy and silent. Behind me, laughter from other houses drifted through the air, families celebrating together, while mine had shattered me with a single word. Parasite? The word echoed in my head as I trudged down the street, each step crunching in the snow. It replayed like a cruel mantra, stabbing deeper with every repetition. But beneath the hurt, beneath the shame, something else began to flicker inside me. A quiet, trembling ember of resolve. If I was a parasite, then I would become the kind that learned to live without the host. The kind that didn't just survive but thrived. And one day, when he needed me most, I would make sure he remembered this Christmas. Not with fondness, but with regret. That night, on the coldest Christmas of my life, I made a silent vow I would never be his parasite again. The first nights after being thrown out blurred together like a cruel dream. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have savings stashed away or an apartment waiting. All I had was a duffel bag stuffed with clothes, a wallet carrying less than $200, and the weight of my father's words pounding inside my skull. Parasite, I crashed at a friend's couch for the first week. She and her family tried to make me feel welcome, even offered me leftovers from their Christmas dinner, but I couldn't eat much. Food tasted like ash when your own father told you were worthless. The days were bitterly cold. I spent them moving from one part-time job to another, serving pancakes in the morning, delivering groceries in the afternoon, tutoring neighborhood kids in the evenings. It was exhausting, but exhaustion kept me from thinking too much. Nights were the worst. Lying awake on that couch, staring at the ceiling, memories of home cut through me like glass. My siblings' faces haunted me. How small my sister looked clutching her dollhouse. How helpless my brother's voice sounded when he whispered "Dad," as I was being thrown out. But what hurt most was the silence from my mother. She hadn't called. She hadn't reached out. Maybe she couldn't, maybe she was afraid of him. But the lack of even a single message left me hollow. Still, slowly, painfully, life began to move forward. By mid-January, I found a tiny studio apartment. It wasn't much, just a cracked linoleum floor, one window that barely shut, and a heater that groaned like it was dying. But it was mine. For the first time, I could leave my shoes wherever I wanted, eat dinner at midnight, or sit in silence without someone snapping at me. Freedom tasted strange at first, lonely and bitter, but I forced myself to savor it. Bills scared me. Each envelope felt like a test I wasn't sure I could pass, but I remembered the countless times I'd handled my father's bills, balancing them carefully so the lights never went out. This time it was only me, and little by little I managed. I picked up extra shifts, took on freelance design work online, and even started learning how to code from free courses at the library. Every dollar I saved felt like a tiny victory. Every night I went to bed with the heater humming, I whispered to myself, "I'm still here." But growth never comes without pain. There were nights I broke down in the shower, muffling my sobs under the spray so no neighbor would hear. Nights I questioned whether my father had been right all along. Maybe I really was useless. Maybe I'd never be more than a parasite pretending at independence. One evening, after a particularly long double shift, I sat in my freezing apartment, eating instant noodles, scrolling through social media. My feed was full of Christmas photos, families smiling, parents hugging their kids. Then I saw one posted by my mother, my siblings sitting around the tree, my father in his armchair. He looked stern but proud, as if he were the sole provider who had given them everything. Rage bubbled in my chest. Did he erase me from the picture so easily? Pretend I never existed? Pretend I hadn't held that house together with the little I earned? I nearly hurled my phone across the room, but instead, I clenched my jaw and whispered, "Fine. Pretend I was never there. One day you'll remember me, and you'll regret the way you treated me." The months dragged on, but with them came progress. By spring, my freelance projects turned into steady contracts. I saved enough to buy a second-hand laptop that didn't crash every other hour. I turned a corner of my tiny apartment into a makeshift office, with sticky notes covering the wall, marking goals, get 3 clients, pay rent early, learn something new each week. And I kept climbing, slowly, quietly. The more I worked, the more I realized how much I had underestimated myself. All those years, my father's voice had drowned out my own, telling me I wasn't enough, that my dreams weren't real, that my efforts didn't matter. Out here, away from him, my voice grew louder. I discovered I was capable of more than just surviving. I was creating, building, proving. Yet, in the quiet moments, I still thought of him. I still heard his voice. I still remembered Christmas. And while part of me longed for his approval, a bigger part was fueled by something sharper, the hunger to prove him wrong. Then the whispers started. It was a neighbor who mentioned it first. "Your dad's been struggling, hasn't he? Heard he's behind on bills." Another time, my younger brother texted me secretly from a borrowed phone. "Dad's angry all the time. Internet got cut last week. Mom cries a lot." My chest tightened reading those words. For years, I had been the invisible glue, quietly patching holes, paying bills behind the scenes so no one noticed. Without me, the cracks were showing. Part of me ached for my siblings, for my mother, but another part of me, one I didn't even recognize at first, felt a grim, quiet satisfaction. The parasite they kicked out had been the one keeping them alive. By summer, I was no longer the same person who had stumbled out into the snow that Christmas night. My bank account was growing. My skills were sharpening. I was standing straighter, speaking louder, no longer shrinking every time someone looked at me. One evening, as the sun set over the city, I stood by my window and whispered to myself, "You called me a parasite, but I've learned to live without you, and now I'm becoming something stronger." What I didn't know then was that fate was already preparing the stage for our next encounter, and this time the roles would be reversed. By autumn, the world looked different through my eyes. The leaves outside my apartment window had turned gold and crimson, and I had grown into someone almost unrecognizable from the shivering, broken kid who had stumbled out into the snow 9 months earlier. My freelance work had blossomed into a real career. I had clients who trusted me, steady paychecks, and even enough savings tucked away to breathe a little easier. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. But with each victory, my father's voice still lingered in the back of my mind, "Parasite. Useless, you'll never last without me." It was ironic, really, because without me, it was his house that was crumbling. It started with whispers. A friend from my old neighborhood mentioned casually over coffee, "Heard your dad's electricity got cut for a few days in August. Guess things aren't as smooth as he pretends." Then my younger brother secretly messaged me late one night. "Dad's really stressed, keeps yelling at Mom about bills. He misses the days when everything was taken care of." I stared at the text, stunned, a bitter laugh rising in my chest. Taken care of? He never even realized I was the one doing that all along. Still, the message tightened something in my chest. My siblings were paying the price for his pride. The first time he reached out to me, it was almost comical. I was working late when my phone buzzed, an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. "Hello," his voice, gruff, heavy with arrogance even after all these months. "So, you've been ignoring your family long enough, haven't you?" My hand froze on the mouse. A storm of emotions surged: anger, longing, disbelief. "Dad, as if you don't recognize me." He scoffed. "Listen, I don't have time for games. Things are tight here. Internet bills overdue. Water's about to get cut again. You need to step up. Stop sulking and send some money. It's your responsibility." As part of this family, my throat went dry. For a second, I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. The man who had called me a parasite, who had kicked me into the snow on Christmas, Now demanding I return like some obedient servant. You want me to pay your bills? I asked slowly. He exhaled like it was obvious. Of course. You've been freeloading off me for years. Time to pay me back. Don't think your little stunt of running off absolves you. You're still my child. You owe me. I felt something snap inside me, not anger, not pain, something colder, no. I said simply, the line went silent. For a moment I thought he hadn't heard. Then his voice thundered through the speaker. What did you just say? No, I repeated. My voice didn't shake this time. I don't owe you anything. I don't live under your roof. I don't eat your food. I don't need your approval, and I'm not paying your bills anymore. I could almost feel the shock radiating through the phone. He was so used to my silence, my obedience. Hearing me stand firm rattled him. You ungrateful, he began, but I cut him off. No, Dad, you called me a parasite. Do you remember that? On Christmas, in front of everyone. You said I was useless, that I drained more than I gave. So I left, I stopped draining. I stopped giving. Now you're drowning in bills because the parasite you despised was the one keeping you afloat. His breathing grew heavy, furious. You think you can talk to me like this? I raised you, I gave you a roof, and I paid for the lights under that roof. I snapped. I paid for the water you drank. I paid for the internet you shouted at me on. I covered your bills, and you called me worthless. Now you can handle them without me. There was a long, stunned silence. Then, through gritted teeth, he hissed, You'll regret this, and he hung up. That night, I sat in my small apartment, staring at my reflection in the dark window. My heart was pounding, my hands trembling, but not from fear. From release. For the first time, I hadn't cowered. I hadn't pleaded for his approval. I had looked him in the eye, even if only through a phone, and told him the truth. And it felt like taking my first real breath in years. Weeks passed. His calls came more frequently, each one angrier than the last. You're abandoning your family. You're selfish. Do you know what your mother is going through? You'll come crawling back when your little fantasy life falls apart. Each time I answered calmly, No, I'm done. And each time I hung up stronger. But then one call was different. His voice wasn't just angry, it was desperate. They're threatening to shut off the heat. Winter's coming. Your brother needs Wi-Fi for school. Your sister needs shoes. If you don't step up, they'll suffer. My chest ached hearing my siblings' names. But then I remembered their faces on Christmas, watching me get thrown out like garbage. I remembered the silence from my mother, who hadn't defended me, and I remembered the word parasite. I'll take care of myself, I said softly, and one day they'll take care of themselves too, but I won't save you, Dad, not anymore. Before he could reply, I hung up. That winter, while my apartment glowed warm and steady, I heard through my brother that the house had lost power for 3 days. My father stormed through the neighborhood, blaming everyone but himself. My mother cried. My siblings shivered under blankets. And all I could think was, this is the life he chose. This is the consequence of his pride. The parasite had left. The host was starving. It wasn't about vengeance anymore. Not exactly. It was about balance. For years, he had taken me for granted, demanded more while giving nothing in return. Now, for the first time, he felt the weight of living without me, and though part of me still hurt for my siblings, another part of me, the part he had crushed for so long, finally stood tall. The tables had turned. I was no longer the parasite. I was the proof that he had been wrong all along. Winter returned, as if to remind me of the night everything changed. Snow coated the sidewalks in soft white layers, and strings of Christmas lights blinked from every porch. Carols spilled out of shop doors, the scent of cinnamon and pine filling the air. The world seemed ready to celebrate, but inside me there was only a quiet storm. Almost a year had passed since that night, a A year since my father's voice cut me open with one word, Parasite. A year since I'd trudged out into the cold, believing I had nothing and no one. Now I had built a life of my own. My apartment, though still small, felt alive with warmth and comfort. The walls were decorated with photos I had taken, sketches I had drawn, gifts from friends who had become my chosen family. My bank account no longer made me flinch when I checked it. My career wasn't just surviving, it was flourishing. I had steady clients, a reputation, and the confidence to keep climbing. Most of all, I had peace, the kind I had never known under my father's roof. On Christmas Eve, my phone buzzed again. His name flashed across the screen. For a long moment, I stared at it. My chest tightened, memories rushing back. His glare, his voice, the way he had slammed his hand on the table as he called me a parasite. I almost didn't answer, but something inside me whispered, "This is your closure," so I picked up. His voice was weaker this time. "It's Christmas, yes." I replied evenly. Silence stretched on the line. Then he cleared his throat. "Your mother made dinner. The kids, they miss you." The old me would have melted, desperate to hear those words. But I heard the hesitation in his tone, the way he skirted around what he really wanted. He wasn't reaching out from love. He was reaching out from need. "I miss them too," I admitted softly, "but I won't come back." His breath caught. "What do you mean? You're still my child. This is still your family." "No, Dad," I interrupted. My voice was calm but firm. Family doesn't throw you into the snow on Christmas. Family doesn't call you a parasite after you've given everything. Family doesn't break you and then expect you to come crawling back. He tried to protest, but I pressed on. "I built a life without you. I pay my own bills. I eat from my own table. I've learned to stand on my own, and I'm proud of that. I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need your roof. I don't need your anger, and I don't need you." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. I almost thought he had hung up. Then, in a voice that sounded smaller than I had ever heard, he muttered, "You'll regret this someday," but the words had lost their power. They bounced off me like raindrops on glass. "No," I said gently, "I won't." And for the first time, I ended the call. The next day, Christmas morning, I wasn't alone. I invited friends from work, neighbors from my building, even a few clients who had nowhere else to go. My apartment was filled with laughter, music, and the aroma of roasted chicken I had cooked myself. Someone brought pie, another brought gifts wrapped in newspaper. We played games, told stories, and when midnight struck, we toasted to survival, to friendship, to freedom. For the first time in my life, Christmas felt like home. Not because of blood, not because of obligation, but because of choice. Later that night, when everyone had left and the apartment was quiet again, I sat by the window with a mug of cocoa. Snow fell softly outside, blanketing the world in silence. I thought about my father, about the bitterness that consumed him, about the pride that blinded him, about the house that was falling apart without me. I thought about my mother's silence, my siblings' sorrow, and I realized something that loosened the knot inside me. Revenge wasn't about watching him suffer. It wasn't about paying him back for the cruelty he had shown me. The sweetest revenge was this, thriving without him, living a life of joy, peace, and freedom, becoming everything he swore I couldn't be. I raised my mug toward the snowy night, as if toasting the memory of that broken Christmas. "You called me a parasite," I whispered. "But parasites can't survive alone, and look at me now." I smiled not bitterly, but with the quiet strength of someone who had endured and emerged stronger. Then I turned from the window, back to my warm apartment, back to the family I had chosen, and back to the life I had built with my own hands. And I knew with absolute certainty that I was finally free,